Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So, in Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, we got the first collaboration announcement, and it was in a Twitter post. I was waiting for the next livestream because I was assuming they would use the opportunity to build some hype, like in the Twitter account tease, hey, we got a collaboration to announce, tune into the livestream, and get the community excited about what's coming, and have a big wow moment in the chat, unless data miners ruin it, but they didn't do that. That was the only reason I was going to cover the next live stream, but now that it's out there, I don't need to cover any more live streams. This collaboration brings up a lot of interesting topics, so let's go into it. First of all, apparently there was a debate about whether there would be collaborations at all, and I'm like, oh my god, is this your first Japanese mobile game? Of course, there will be collaborations. They are often the biggest moneymakers, and Japanese mobile games need to rake in a lot of cash to keep running. The only games I can get away without doing collaborations are generational hits like Uma Musume. A big reason Monster Strike makes so much money and constantly attracts new players is because of collaborations. And then, in Ever Crisis, I see people saying that since the collaboration is here, that means more collaborations are possible, and I'm like, come on, this is a revelation, this is news. People ask me why I don't pick up Ever Crisis, or why I don't pick up this or that game, or why Near Reincarnation will be the last mobile game I cover, and it's because of stuff like this. No matter how much I repeat myself on the standard practices of Japanese mobile games, I have followed the Japanese mobile gaming industry in Japanese for a decade, and yet no one listens to me. Good grief. Feels like I'm making little impact, and it's exasperating, and that's why I'm ready to retire. It might be good timing anyway, since the industry bubble seems to be bursting. I will make a video about this in the near future, I hope. Another complaint I saw was that people were upset the next part of the main story was getting pushed back for this collaboration, and I'm like, what's the rush? You do understand mobile games are meant to go on for years, right? Instead, we should be afraid that the main story is done too quickly. Anyway, we have our collaboration, Final Fantasy IX, and it is costumes and weapons. Leading up to this, I was really wondering if the game would go with the characters, but it didn't seem very feasible for two big reasons. One, the way characters are linked with weapons in Ever Crisis means that new characters would either need a bunch of new weapons just for them, or they would have to share a weapon pool with an established character, essentially becoming a skin, either way of which comes with their own problems. And two, the game is very strong in its identity in the world of Final Fantasy VII, and characters from other games might break that sense of world identity. So, for those reasons, I think going with costumes and weapons is an understandable way to go. Also, new characters means more voice actors, which are expensive and troublesome to get. Notice that they didn't even bother with global voice actors. What I worry about with this collaboration system, and what I'm sure the developer and publisher are worried about, is if this model will lead to sales. To be perfectly honest, seeing Cloud and Tifa dressed as characters from another game is a little underwhelming. I did a thought experiment to make sure it wasn't just because I don't like Final Fantasy VII. I imagined my beloved Final Fantasy VI characters dressed up, like Locke as Zidane, Sabin as Amarant, and it did nothing for me. If anything, it hit me like a parody or like fan art. I guess I just prefer the original, the canon, not even the costume, the canon look. You could keep the original costumes of 7, but change the hair, and I would be like, no, those aren't the characters I know. I'm not everyone, but I can imagine a lot of folks feeling the same. We'll see how the sales play out this month, and then I'll report that at the end. Just to compare with another aptly bought game, I think multiple costumes per character works fine in Near Reincarnation, because the canon is much less established there, so there's much less precedent to feel weird about, and the ideas of alternate realities and timelines is very much in the forefront of Near Reincarnation. Also, each costume is so tastefully and artfully done that none of them feel like way out of bounds. Not to say that the Ever Crisis collaboration costumes are low quality, but still. It's interesting to kind of reconsider the collaborations in Near Reincarnation in this context, because they went with reincarnation characters in Final Fantasy XIV job costumes, not character costumes, so no one dressed up like Yushutora or Thancred. They went for Samurai or White Mage. so that feels more natural. And then with See No Alice, spoiler alert, the fairy tale costumes of like Snow White and Alice and Red Riding Hood were merely fantasy world projections of real-life characters, so that also ends up feeling natural. I'm reminded of Final Fantasy 15, and pretty much immediately being able to change everyone's costumes, the main party's costumes, and I was like, is this going to hurt or dilute the identities of the main characters? To talk about something positive about the overall experience of Ever Crisis, one thing I'm really glad to see is limited time bosses that seem challenging and fun and full of personality. This is not present in either Near Reincarnation or War of the Visions, and I feel like it's a big weak point for both. In Near Reincarnation, there is sometimes a difficult PvE boss, like 2 or 3 times a year, but they are just like black shadows with no story or personality, so that's boring. And War of the Visions is so heavily focused on PvP that even though they could do interesting limited time bosses like in Brave Exvius, they choose to not do it, which is a large part of why I quit the game. I saw a JP user complaining about Ever Crisis, saying all this game is defeating limited time bosses, and I'm like, that sounds awesome. I would be interested to hear, however, how people like the Ever Crisis limited time boss fights. They do look fun. But another forehead slappable comment that I saw in the global community was people saying that they were hoping that Chrono Trigger gets a collaboration, and I was like, is there any bigger show me you're new to Japanese mobile games without telling me you're new to Japanese mobile games comment than that? I said it before, but I'll say it again. The contracts that it is tied up with, somebody has to die and then pass on the rights before a Chrono Trigger collaboration happens with any mobile game. Alright, and finally, we can end the video talking about Final Fantasy IX. I see a lot of comments saying that this and the War of the Visions collaboration signals the remake is close to release, but, as always, I remind people that just because something happened somewhere, it rarely signals something happening elsewhere. Always, when a collaboration is teased, people are like, oh, this game was released recently, or that game is having an anniversary, or this character is getting merchandise, so therefore, the collaboration must be that, and then it turns out wrong 95% of the time. And I keep telling people that, and nobody listens to me. But the reason why this is so rarely true is because it is difficult to coordinate releases like across games, across platforms, across companies, sometimes across countries. Also, mobile game developers are in the business of surprising their users, and going by what is current would not be terribly surprising. Now, is a Final Fantasy IX remake in the works? I think chances there are pretty good. The community has shown a lot of interest over the years, including creating their own goddamn remaster. And I'm sure Square Enix has seen that, seen the interest in the game, and thought, a remake would be worthwhile. Will it be something on the level of Final Fantasy VII Remake? I highly doubt that. Rather, I expect the same base game and story, but with cosmetic improvements, quality of life stuff, and perhaps like bonus dungeons or weapons or side stories or something. Maybe add voice acting? Something like the upcoming Super Mario RPG. I do not expect an overhaul of like the battle system or the story, and I do not expect it to be released for PlayStation 5, maybe Switch, maybe Steam. If it were released for Switch, I think I would pick it up. Final Fantasy IX is easily my favorite Final Fantasy on the PS1, that's including Tactics, and among my favorite Final Fantasies overall. It's in my top 5, as I said in my Final Fantasy tier list video, link below. For soundtrack, it's my number 1 pick for most underrated, and overall, top 3, maybe, after 4 and 6. As much as I love Mr. Sakimoto and Iwata for doing Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XII, I have to give it to Uematsu Nobuo. I have 3 Final Fantasies that I call perfect. They are 1, 4, and 12. And the only reason 9 is not perfect is it's too easy, which is also a problem with 6. But story, world, characters, humor, it's all top class. If I picked up Final Fantasy IX for the Switch, I might play it in like a challenge run, maybe to make it more challenging, and make videos of that playthrough. I do have one request for the potential remake, and that is related to the proportions of the characters with the big heads. I'm actually fine with the proportions decision, but By going with that detail, the game becomes a step removed from our reality more than all the other Final Fantasies. So these high-def graphic cutscenes, they feel too realistic. It's like, imagine someone in real life having an anime-proportioned face. It would be weird. So what I hope they do in the Final Fantasy IX remake is apply that removal from reality to also the world and then just the graphics overall. If they could do something to make it feel like Paper Mario, or that Yoshi Yarn game that looked like it was a miniature or like handcrafted or something, rather than photorealistic, I think that would make all the elements of the game more harmonious with each other and make the game feel even more special than it already is. I know they probably won't do it because Final Fantasy, especially these days, is about trying to appeal to as broad an audience as possible, but if I can have my pie-in-the-sky wish, that is mine. Okay, those are my thoughts on the first collaboration in Ever Crisis. Probably next video I make on this game will be the month 3 sales results. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.